What if Graham Mertz fails? What is the best case, worst case for Wisconsin Badgers quarterbacks this year? We're going to talk about that and more on today's Locked On Badgers. We got our quarterback preview. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Badgers, making it your first listen every day. I am Ryan Herrings, your host of Locked On Badgers. This is the show for you every day, covering your team. And we're going to bring Justin Julka into the show, as we often do. And we're talking quarterback preview. So it is really getting to that point in time where we want to break down all the positions. And who better to have on the show than Justin, who is, at times not been the most thrilled with the passing game. So this is going to be perfect.
That's putting it mildly.
But listen, let's get into it. So I want to break this into a couple segments. I want to start with who's coming back, newcomers, who'd we lose? Obviously, at the quarterback spot, we really lost nobody. So I'm just going to run through the depth chart quick, and then we're going to kind of break it up from there. Obviously, Graham Mertz, starting quarterback. Chase Wolfe, the seniors, backing him up. Deacon Hill, redshirt freshman. And then two newcomers, Myles Burkett, freshman out of Franklin, Wisconsin, who did enroll early, so he was here for the spring. And Howe, who's a freshman out of Avon, Connecticut, who I don't think a lot of people know of. Walk-on.
He's a 3-star, wasn't
he? Yeah, like low 2, high 3. He's actually got pretty good film for a walk-on.
High 2, low 3?
High 2, low 3, yes. He's not a high 3-star walk-on quarterback, sadly. But for a walk-on, if you watch his film, you can look up Howe. He's got enough there that I wouldn't say completely write him off. But that's the depth chart. And really, Burkett and Howe aren't going to factor in this year unless, the Armageddon happens. So it's really Mertz, Wolfe, and Deacon Hill is your three on the depth chart there. How do you feel about – I want to start here because I think we're going to get into Mertz a lot, Justin. Is Chase Wolfe the backup this entire year, or do you think Deacon Hill can push him out of that spot?
Oh, man. I'd like to say yes, but based off of what we're hearing coming out of camp, I don't believe so. Especially, it sounds like Wolfe actually had a really good day the other day. Mm-hmm. Now, I really temper expectations because he's one of those guys where I feel like one day he can throw 7 touchdowns in practice, and the next he can come out and throw like 1 touchdown and 6 picks. He just takes a lot of unnecessary risks with the football at times. So I honestly don't feel like he's a guy that the staff is in love with if they have to put somebody in. So I think that there is room for Deacon to push, and if he proves that he'll take care of the football, that's clearly valued more than playmaking with this team. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely an opportunity there for him. So I feel like there will be a chance if he can put it together in practice.
Yep. No, I agree with that. I don't think Chase Wolfe is entrenched as a backup just because he's never really been able to push Mertz. In a limited experience, he's turned the ball over. And Deacon Hill's got that cannon arm that we've heard about, right? He's got a carrying skill that I don't think Chase Wolfe really has. Mm-hmm. Let's just really quickly, and we don't want to spend too much time on this because it's not a fun trip, but let's just remember, last year, right? So let's revisit what happened. Graham Mertz, 59% completion percentage, 1,900 yards, 10 touchdowns, 11 picks, right? Just a terrible season. Really, really terrible.
It was like 92 or 93 in the country in QBR, if I recall.
Yeah. I think you can make and we've done this before. We've talked about it. Statistically, you can make a argument. He was the worst quarterback in the Big Ten. Like in the quarterback that had enough reps.
There was parts of the year where he was the worst quarterback in the country. And that's not hyperbole. After the first 3 or 4 games, he was legitimately in that area for the worst. And especially when you take into account the pick sixes. So he got better as the season went on, but we also had weaker opponents. So it's something I really want to temper expectations because there's people that acted like things really turned with him as the season went on. And to me, if you take out that Rutgers game, it wasn't a significant change. Like, I mean, he didn't throw as many picks, but it's not like we were productive in the passing game.
Right. You're really talking that middle part of the season, right? Yeah. Where he kind of looked like he turned it around. But to your point, like you got to look at the totality. You're not as bad as your worst moments. You're not as good as your best moments, right? So you got to average it out. And when you average it out, that's what the season statistics are, right? That's what he did over the year. 10 touchdowns, 11 picks, 59% completion percentage. So what you have is a guy that's not completing a lot of passes and still throwing a lot of picks, right? It's this worst combination of both ends, because a lot of times it's the gunslinger who's pushing the ball downfield, but he's turning up. We had neither.
And that's we were throwing basically 10 yards and in for most of the season, and he was still a turnover machine.
Right.
So we probably mitigated some of it because we were so conservative with the passing game that we limited some of it, but it really hurt the offense. Like, I mean, there's no other way to put it, that the passing game being so conservative last year probably cost Wisconsin 2 to 3 wins. Like it just wasn't, there was nothing there to lean on to balance things out and to keep defenses on their heels. And it put a ton of pressure on the offensive line and the running game.
What if, I'm not going to do this for most positions, but I think quarterback is unique with Bobby Engram, new coaching coming in. Like, how much more confident are you just with that shift? Primarily not even Bobby Engram coming in, more Paul Chryst kind of taking a step back.
I think we needed to freshen things up. I think it's hard to really look at this and know how much really needed to be done. There's a lot of people. I mean, you and I have discussed this a lot before. You're kind of on the same view as I am, which is that, yes, we needed to change the scheme somewhat, but there's also a huge talent deficit right now at the quarterback position. And we can talk about physical traits all we want, but the talent, the true talent there is production. If you're talented, you put up numbers. And right now we're not doing that at that particular position. And that's something that has to change. And that's why looking into the season, the way I kind of look at it is, if we want to have a really good season, I don't care about efficiency as much as I care about productivity. Like, we need to be more productive at that position.
Right. No, I agree. What is there any scenario here? And I think I know your answer. Is there any scenario where Mertz gets benched? Not he gets hurt and loses the job, where he gets benched.
I think so. I think that's a possibility.
Okay.
Hey, what has he shown us in the course of now this will be his 3rd season starting, that has proven that he's got a lock on that position, other than people telling us that he's got a lock at that position?
Is it time? Here's another one, right? So I disagree with you, by the way. I don't think. I think it's as much. I think it's as much an knock on the depth at the quarterback spot that he's not going to get replaced no matter what. But it's also, I just don't think this is the coaching staff that is going to pull a multi-year starter, barring injury.
Well, at some point you have to look at it then as what you're doing in the best interest of the team. Because if your quarterback is playing as poorly as he played to start the last season, like, then you have to pull him. Like, even if it's just hey, wake up, you have to bench that guy and say, you need to get your head right. You're not helping us. In fact, everyone else is busting their butt and you're a detriment. And that's really where the concern lies there. And that's how I look at it from the standpoint. I don't think anybody realistically is unbenchable, but you have to take it into context. Well, if somebody is consistently playing poorly, and we've said this about numerous players before, that, we've had special teams positions and stuff like that before, that we've talked about this before, where it's like, what are you hurting? Like, if a quarterback, you have all these talking heads in the press that will sit there and say, well, it looks like he's far and away better than everybody else. Well, how bad could the next guy be if you have somebody that throws 3 picks and fumbles, right, and is giving pick sixes? Like, are they throwing the ball in the wrong direction? Like, how bad are they legitimately?
We don't know, but we have seen Mertz though in limited, or not Mertz. We've seen Wolfe in limited action. Like, that dude does not take care of the football, right?
He doesn't. He does not. I mean, there's an argument to be made that we have seen him in such a small sample size that we don't know if there'd be growth.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Now, that's fair, but what we've seen so far hasn't been good. So it leads us to believe that you're playing the lesser of two evils.
I think that's what it is, and I don't think there's any scenario, to be honest. Just with his experience, the lack of experience behind him, where he gets benched, barring injury. But we'll see. Coming up, we're going to talk a little best case, worst case with this position. Like what is the realistic good and what is the terrifyingly realistic bad that could happen this year with the quarterback spot? We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. First, a message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. It's one of those situations you're hanging out with some friends, you're putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end, people start to head out. You think of calling for a ride, but nah, you're good. You live nearby, no big deal. You can make it home okay, no big deal. What are the odds you're going to get pulled over? Even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, lose your license, lose your job, total your car, or you could kill somebody. Everybody knows the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic, often deadly. However, that doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe, plan ahead, get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's life forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. I want to thank everyone again for listening to Locked On Badgers, making this one of your first listens every day. This is where we cover your team every day. Really do appreciate everyone tuning in. We're going to continue the quarterback preview, get Justin back on. Let's do some best case, worst case. Let's start optimistically. Okay, and this is realistic best case, worst case, and we're not talking injury, right? Obviously, the worst case for every position is someone gets hurt. But best case, Bobby Ingram's in, offensive line's better, Graham Mertz is more comfortable. Whatever it is, what's the realistic ceiling for Mertz this season?
If I'm going to say what I expect, and people who think that he can be Cone, I don't see it. I don't see him getting to a 2019 type season this year. Number one, we're not hearing that type of talk out of camp where he's far and away the best. I think that he's the most comfortable, but I don't think that he's lighting it up to the point where they're saying, well, he's a lock. I mean, we're kind of hearing that, but that's because we're not really seeing much from the guys behind it all. The way I kind of look at it is, if I had to guess, I would say a good season from him probably would be towards the ceiling this year. 15, 16 touchdowns. It's going to be like a Tolzien stat line without the efficiency. So you're looking at like 16 touchdowns, 9 picks, and probably 24 to 2,500 yards. Which is a step in the right direction, but it's a step
in the right direction. That's a low ceiling. 16 touchdowns, 9 picks. As the realistic ceiling. Like, that is a low bar, Justin.
Listen, that is a huge step forward for him compared to what we've seen the last couple of years. If he gets the completion percentage up a little bit and the third down efficiency comes back for this team, I'm tempering my expectations for what I expect from the quarterback position. Because until he proves that he can go out and light it up, I think that this is more in line with what he is.
No, I think that's really fair too. In my previous show to this one, I did one where I was pretty high on the passing game just based on some of the things I've heard and based on some of the changes and that's a reflection of, I think the offensive line's going to be better. The receivers are going to be better. The running backs are going to be better. Right. So that's a reflection. Bobby Ingram's here. That's a reflection of a lot of things around Mertz, but I did have someone step into the YouTube comments and say, listen, I'm done. And I forget, I apologize to whoever's listening. I don't have the name in front of me, but they said, I need to see it. I don't care anymore about any noise, any superlatives. I need to see it. And so I think that point is incredibly fair. I still think the ceiling, like the realistic ceiling to me is higher than 16, 17 touchdowns. Like, I think he can be, with a better offensive cast around, a better play calling, I think he could be a 20 touchdown guy. I think that is a realistic ceiling for this season.
Well, I mean, a lot of this will come down to how loose the rope is on him. Mm-hmm. Because if he plays poorly and they start to lock him down again, the stats aren't going to be there. To be fair, he threw a lot last year and the stats weren't there. So there was opportunity for him to have a good stat line. He just wasn't productive. And that's my fear. Now, I am open to it. I want him to play awesome. I would love him to go ball out and have close to 30 touchdowns. That would be amazing. I would be super excited. But we're not hearing that he's having that kind of camp. And that's the thing that makes me leery of it, that he's lighting it up or that the offense is at least on par with the defense. And we've seen that in years. We had Stave years where they would talk about, like, yeah, today the offense won it. And why was that? Because Stave would typically knew what play to do, where to throw it. And the biggest knock on him was inconsistency. Like he could have really good games, he could have really poor games.
But I'm a Stave guy.
Yeah. We did a great job with him. I mean, that's a guy that caught onto an NFL practice squad as a walk-on quarterback who, he was limited on physical tools a little bit, but is there anybody here that wouldn't take him over Mertz right now? In a heartbeat, I would stop.
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, based on production, you almost have to. Although, listen, Stave had his own.
He ran the offense cleaner too. Though. He did. But I trusted him to move up ball way more than I trust.
He was really good in clutch moments for some reason. Joel Stave, like he was very good down the stretch of games.
The Iowa run.
Yeah, like he had a clutch gene in him, which great quarterbacks do. Not that he's not a great quarterback, but good quarterbacks have a clutch gene in them. Let me ask you this though, because you talk about practice reports, you talk about Mertz, not necessarily getting. People aren't saying that he's lighting it up. This has also been a super salty defense for, Stave wasn't going against.
I agree with that. It's going to get easier, and this is where when I talk about the ceiling that I put out there for him, where this could get blown out of the water right after the first 3 games. If they give him rope in the first 3 games and we throw a lot, there's a chance he could have 9 touchdowns going into the 4th game. Mm-hmm. It's possible he lights it up the first 3 weeks and. Yeah. We're just beating on overmatched opponents.
I was going to say he's going to have 9 touchdowns in those first 3 and 9 after the first 4, right? Because we're not. I'm just so beaten down by Ohio State at this point. Yeah. I don't even know what we do. But
are you saying that he's going to have 9 touchdowns and 9 picks after?
I'm saying that Ohio State game may even out some stats for a lot of Badger players. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. So. That's, I think, a really good point you leaned into. I think those first 3 games are incredibly important, and they're incredibly important for things that in the past, Paul Chryst has been totally content with playing a lesser team and running the ball 60 times and just leaning on them. I think you have to throw to build some rhythm and confidence in this past game, and those first 3 games are a great opportunity to do it. And I'll be really ticked off if Chryst doesn't take that opportunity.
And this brings up one of the greater points that was brought up about the offense, and that is that Bobby Engram is the one making the play calling. Now, how much flexibility he's going to be given, how much, power he's going to be given to run it based off of his aggressiveness versus what Paul is, will kind of probably tell us how the season will go. Because if he's aggressive and he's attacking, we could have the offense could be night and day this year. Like that's the thing. Plays are being run in practice. We have no idea what the mindset is.
Players are saying air raid.
It's not going to be air raid.
It's not. But I love that we're hearing something different. Like it's not going to be air raid.
Aggressive play calling versus conservative play calling makes a huge difference in terms of how the defense reacts to you.
Right. Well, here's what I'm curious about. Like I think Bobby Engram is going to have freedom to call a lot of plays and make decisions, right? But I'm worried that Paul Chryst is going to box him in situationally, right? Like
that, and I think that will happen. I have no doubt about that. Here. And then we're in a major moment in the game, and I could see him being the voice of reason or whatever. Now, I would love for Bobby to be able to say, hey, I'm confident in this play. Let me roll with this. And hopefully they have that type of relationship because that would be amazing. But I think that is kind of what we need to find out this year. It will tell us a lot situationally this year as to how much trust Paul has in Bobby Engram.
For sure. All right, no, I think that's good. Let's coming up. We're going to grade the position. What is the position at right now, and what is the future grade?
We need to talk about what is the worst case scenario too.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. I think I almost blanked that from my brain.
I don't think you want to see how negative I'll go.
So let's do this. Yeah, let's jump it in. No, that's a great point. I got off track on that. Realistic worst case, again, not including any potential injury.
Worst case for the passing game. In general, do you want me to go Mertz or the quarterback position?
No, quarterback position. Yeah.
Okay. Worst case scenario, Mertz gets injured first couple of games.
You're already ignoring my rules. No injuries.
Okay, no injuries. All right. Is ineffective after the first 3 games and it gets pulled against Ohio State. They put in Wolfe, who's also ineffective, and Deacon Hill ends up out there too early. And I think that's – I mean, it could happen. I wouldn't be shocked kind of if it did. I think they will avoid going to Deacon unless they feel he's ready at all costs. But nothing would surprise me if those two guys are ineffective.
Yeah, that is a nightmare scenario, right? If they feel like they have to pivot from Graham Mertz, because I don't think Wolfe is a good enough player, and I don't think Deacon Hill's ready.
Yeah,
which reinforces the point, though. I don't think they'll go away from Mertz almost no matter what, because they didn't last year, right? And he was
right? Well, that's the thing. It's like at some point you have to try something different, right? Because if you're just if that's what the ceiling is, that's what the ceiling is. Like, stop fooling yourself. If it's not getting better, you have to change something. And that's the spot that's causing the problem.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off you here because I think realistic worst case is last year. Like, I really think that is, and that's not implausible. Like, that's the realistic worst. We saw it for an entire season. You get another year where he's not efficient. The passing game is not efficient. Mertz isn't efficient. The depth isn't there to push him, and he throws more interceptions than touchdowns. And because of that, the coaching staff gets crazy conservative. We run the ball a ton. I think that's the worst case. I think it's a repeat of last year. And I don't think you can't write that off, even though I don't think that's going to happen.
There's a greater than 50% chance right now that I think that's the outcome. Now,
I'm not that low on it.
Well,
but
I say that is the history that we've seen. So to me, I'm not saying it's a lot. It's not much over 50%, but it is realistically probably the most likely outcome. Now, there's a chance that he takes a big step forward. I would say that, it's probably somewhere in the middle, but the changes that we've made, it's going to really come down to Graham here and how much he's developing. We're going to find out this season how much of this was scheme and how much of this was Graham Mertz, because we clearly learned it's not the wide receivers after both of them blew up in preseason games in the NFL.
Yeah, they look good. And even as long shots to make the 53 man, like if you can hang in those are legit things, like markers on a player. If you can hang in preseason,
if you're pushing to make a roster, then that means that you somewhat belong at the NFL level.
It also means you
should be a good college player,
right? It means you were definitely not the problem in D1 football. No, I agree. All right, coming up, we're gonna do a little grading on this. What's the quarterback grade for this position right now, and what is it going forward in the future, looking down the scope with the depth chart and recruiting? We're going to get into that next on Locked On Badgers. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Locked On Badgers, making it one of your first listens every day. Really, really do appreciate it. We got Justin Joke on the show, quarterback preview, your show, your team every single day. And let's do it, man. I want to do this for all the positions. It's going to be, if anyone follows baseball, prospects get a present grade and a future grade. Like maybe it's a 35 hit tool, but his future hit tool they think is going to be a 55-60 for baseball nerds out there. So I kind of want to do that in a way with our positions. What would you grade the position right now for this season, Justin? And then we're going to get into a future grade in our next little chunk here.
Based off what we've seen, I would grade the position currently a D. Now, I do think that the grade going forward potentially goes up, but there's a lot of changes that have to take effect. Like one of these guys has to be a hit. Burkett or Hill has to be capable of being a multi-year starter, and they have to show that they're talented enough to be a plus player for Wisconsin.
So you're going D for this season. Let's
season. Based off of what I've seen coming into this season, that's where I put us at.
Yeah.
By the end of the season, it could be a C plus, B minus, B. It really depends on if we see a complete change from what we've seen so far. As you said, what we've seen the baseline for Mertz, we know that behind him there's nobody they feel comfortable with. We have to grade that based off of that. So his play at this point has been well below average, and we need to see if he's not going to be the answer, somebody prove that they're better than that in order for that grade to move up.
I actually think you're a little kind on your grade. To be honest,
I'm being honest. I didn't want to be put us at an F.
Yeah, honestly,
but that's kind of where my mind is overall for this. I'm trying to be conservative with and give some respect to the fact that there's opportunity for things to be better.
So I would say if we're looking at it right now going into this year, I almost have to say D minus, F plus. There's no F pluses, but we're very realistic. And I've said on the show several times, I think it's going to be better. So I think my end grade this year, but I got to see it a little bit too. Yeah. But we are realistically talking about a quarterback who was probably again, one of the worst in the Big Ten last year, and no real
I'm going to
depth
guess
behind
that
him.
he had the worst quarterback rating of anyone in Power 5.
I mean, it's bad, right? Like, so I think the present day grade coming into this year, it's bad. It's got to be like a D. And nobody was.
And he's not being challenged. That's the
other reason it's a low grade, because the coaching staff could have brought in a transfer to at least provide depth, right? To at least challenge him a little bit.
Yeah.
So nobody was brought in the offseason to a quarterback room that was already light and that was very unproductive. I think the present day grade is a D-. And I only say D- because I do think Mertz hasn't had the best system built around him. Like I don't like what we've done with offensive coordinators, quarterback coaches. So I think there's upside there, which is why I don't think it's a complete failure. Let's talk grade going forward. Looking at everybody on the depth chart, multiple year players that are available, recruiting, however it's going this year, where would you put the present day future grade?
Well, let's start with this. Who I'm going to ask you, who do you think is most likely out of guys on the roster to be starting next year?
Graham Mertz.
See, I don't think that you can, if he has another season like he did this last season, regardless of which you have to go another direction.
I don't think he's going to have a bad year.
And that's fair. So I'm going based off the information I have to this point. So if I'm going to say that if he does not show significant growth, I think it's going to be either Hill or Burkett. And for whatever reason, Burkett, I think from a gamesmanship standpoint, is the guy I feel is most likely to be, hey, it clicks and he just runs the offense the way they want. So he's one of those guys where I feel like he'll do the things to be efficient as running the offense. Now, I can't give a high grade based off of how this recruiting cycle has gone, which has been an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. And
when I start looking at guys who are being rated at roughly an 80 by 247, which, I mean, that's like, 170th quarterback in the country or type,
That's Scott Tolzien territory.
Yes. You got to be looking at guys. I mean, if you're going to take a flyer, and I've said this from the beginning, quarterback is such a low hit rate, look for the physical tools. And if the guy's not showing it mentally, hope that you can develop the mental side, because most of these guys that look like they have the mental capability don't do it at the NCAA level either. So you're better off getting the physical tools of a guy who can run and has a big arm, but maybe hasn't put it together, and hope that it clicks mentally, than go after the guy who's mentally but has some shortcomings with some of the physical tools, and then it doesn't click, and now you have a guy who's limited physically and also doesn't have the brain to do what you want him to do.
And we've certainly seen that play out in several different variations. I would say, I think the future quarterback grade, looking at the roster over the next several years, I'm going to call it a C. Like, I don't think what's happened in this year's cycle is pretty bad. I do like Myles, Burkett, and Deacon Hill. I C-. Like, it's just a position that there's no. Here's where the problem is. There's nobody behind Mertz where you can point at and say, I really think he's the answer, right? It's just a bunch of question marks, which could work out, by the way. But they could also there's not a lot of pedigree there. It worries me. Again, I've talked about it. I'm not going to harp on it. It worries me that Deacon Hill came into spring camp overweight. I don't love that. I think it's a red flag.
Well, it's not even that necessarily for me. I realize he's a young quarterback, but the fact Mertz was so poor last year and that Deacon is not challenging him at this point, given what we saw last year, gives me pause, because it's like, how bad are you guys that, he played this poorly and you don't have the plays locked down? Because it's like, we've seen what average is. Like, Stave was average. He was a guy that ran the offense. There was no frills. It was, this is the play, I'm going to go out there and this is where the ball's supposed to go. And he understood that. And we don't have that right now.
We would kill for average.
We would love to have, like, last year we probably win 10, 11 games if we have a guy who could be average.
Well, we certainly beat Penn State, right? We absolutely beat Penn State. I don't think we beat I don't know, but we definitely would have been better. We would have beat Penn State.
The game changes completely if you're able to competently run offense against Notre Dame. So it's hard to say.
Who knows? But it wouldn't have been a 30-point beat down in the fourth
quarter.
It
definitely wouldn't have been a blowout.
So I still need a grade from you, though. Looking at it over the next 3-4 years.
Man, 3-4 years. can I say I'm going to stay with a D next year and then jump up to a C?
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, that's about where I'm at. I think you can look look at Deacon Hill and Myles Burkett and say, I could see either of those guys succeeding.
Yeah.
That wouldn't shock me at all. We just don't know.
It doesn't. And what we need to see is we need to hear things that are showing that those guys are growing. And that's what we haven't seen at this point. So out of any of them, truly any of them, like we've heard that Mertz looks better this year than he did last year, but we need to hear that the growth is there and that the right plays are being made consistently.
Would have loved to transfer quarterback this offseason. Yep. Let me tell you.
I was begging for one.
Somebody that had some experience that could step in, but alas, it is not going to happen. It did not happen. So that is the quarterback preview, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Some rough grades from myself and Justin, but I think it is what it is. More previews coming up, better, more positive grades coming up in our following positional previews this week.
Yeah, let's do defense.
Defense, running back. Like there's some good stuff coming up. And we certainly both think quarterback could potentially be better this year. So we're going to keep talking about it. Football season's coming up. I want to thank everyone for listening to Locked On Badgers, making it one of your first listens every single day. Really, really do appreciate it. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten. Get all the latest news from around the conference as the season comes up. And with that, tons of good content coming up. Appreciate Justin stopping by as always, and we'll continue talking to you guys on Wisconsin.